They thought she would stay silent, that if they cornered her, tore her shirt, and laughed loud enough, she would shrink like all the others before her. But Cold Creek had forgotten one truth. Pressure does not only break, it forges. In the stillness of that moment, with eyes burning and fabric split, she chose not fear, but form. And when she moved, it was not violence. It was control, a quiet storm they never saw coming. The air in Cold Creek always smelled sweet in February, not the kind of sweet that came from spring blossoms or warm pies cooling on windowsills. No, Cold Creek's sweetness was the manufactured kind, rose-scented locker air fresheners, department store perfume, and the chalky sugar of 1,000 candy hearts melting slowly into the seams of polished tile floors. On the surface, Cold Creek, Kentucky was a postcard, neatly painted porches, American flags that never seemed to fade. White picket fences so pristine it felt as if they had been drawn, not built. But underneath the buttercream smiles and how are yous at the grocery store checkout, there was a different kind of flavor, one not printed on any welcome sign. Salt, quiet, lingering salt. And 16-year-old Nalia Trent had tasted it since the day her family moved to Cold Creek. The only black family on Sycamore Lane, the only black girl on the Rose Hill High cheerleading squad, and, until recently, the only student not included in the annual Valentine's invite list. That changed yesterday. For the first time since she joined Rose Hill, Nalia's name appeared on 3 different envelopes. The handwriting was unmistakably masculine. Bold loops, heavy pen pressure, letters so large they swallowed the pink cardstock. Each envelope sealed with a crimson wax stamp that matched the school colors, red and white. Inside, the messages were brief and nearly identical. See you at the Valentine's bash. Be my +1? One was signed Griffin Rourke, the school's star quarterback and son of the Cold Creek police chief. Another came from Bryce Lang, built like a vending machine and heir to Lang Agricultural Supply, the largest employer in town. The third bore the name Tanner Beck, quieter than the others, but no less embedded in the power structure of Rose Hill's athletic elite. Nalia read all 3 notes in silence, seated on her bed beneath a poster of Misty Copeland in mid-flight. Then, with hands that did not tremble, she folded the cards carefully, slid them into a drawer, and made her decision. She would say no to all of them. It was not a political decision, not an act of rebellion, just truth, simple and unspectacular. She did not want to go, not with any of them. By 8:30 in the morning, the school hallways were saturated with red. Red roses, red paper hearts taped to lockers, red dresses worn beneath uniform code allowances. Red lipstick applied in restroom mirrors by girls who spoke in group chat code. And then there was Nalia. Walking with her back straight and her chin lifted, she wore the standard cheer uniform, crisp white pleats, red and black trim, black leggings underneath. She had tied her box braids into a single, elegant bun, the ends curled slightly. Her only accessory was a silver pin shaped like a tiger paw, clipped near her shoulder. As she entered the gym for morning practice, she caught the stares. Not from strangers, from her own team. Rachel Whitmore, co-captain, gave a polite smile, strained and soft-edged. Behind her, the rest of the squad clustered in a loose semicircle, whispering in rhythms that stopped whenever Nalia drew near. "You look bold today," Rachel commented as Nalia passed. Nalia nodded. "Thanks, just showing up." Coach Halverson was nowhere in sight yet, and Valentine's playlist music pulsed low from a Bluetooth speaker at the corner of the gym. The girls were stretching, but Nalia could feel it, the way a room holds its breath when someone unexpected walks in. Her rejection had traveled faster than she thought. Between second and third period, Griffin Rourke caught up with her by the water fountains outside room 204. His varsity jacket gleamed under the fluorescent lights, school emblem shining over his heart like a badge. "Hey, Nalia," he said, voice easy, practiced. "Got my note right?" She turned to face him fully, her backpack strap slung across her chest like a barrier. "I did," she replied. "Thank you for the invite. But I am not going." Griffin blinked. For a moment, just long enough for the mask to slip, something cold flickered in his eyes. "Not even to stop by?" he asked, a smile still on his lips but now made of glass. "No," Nalia said, and then walked away before he could speak again. She knew better than to wait for his answer, or his reaction. By lunchtime, word had spread. Bryce Lang leaned against the vending machine near the cafeteria entrance, surrounded by his usual pack of football teammates. He watched Nalia cross the room without speaking, but the moment she passed, he laughed. Tanner Beck stood farther off, near the windows. He met her eyes, and then quickly looked away. The line between admiration and entitlement was always razor-thin. Today, it had already begun to blur. When Nalia opened her locker at the end of the day, the first thing she noticed was the rose. It was white. Every other locker in the row had a red one, a donation from the PTA's Valentine Spirit Drive. Red for love, red for passion, red for tradition. But hers was white, isolated, alone. She reached for it, and that was when she saw the phone wedged between her textbooks. Not hers. Someone had slipped it inside, its screen blinking with a new message notification. With wary fingers, Nalia unlocked it. There was only one message, sent from an unlisted number. "You forgot your place." Her hand clenched around the phone. Somewhere behind her, someone laughed. The air in Cold Creek still smelled sweet, but as Nalia stared down at the message, a sharp, bitter taste settled beneath her tongue. Salt, and this time, she was done swallowing it. At 12:22 in the afternoon, the cafeteria at Rosehill High was a storm. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like a swarm of invisible insects. The hum of laughter, the clatter of trays, and the sharp hiss of soda dispensers blended into a dull roar that swallowed all nuance. It was Valentine's Day Eve, and the social order was alive and ruthless. In the northeast corner, as always, Nalia Trent sat with her tray untouched. Chicken nuggets, green beans, a plastic container of fruit cocktail floating in syrup. The colors on her tray were festive, the hunger in her stomach was not. Across from her, Jade Morales fiddled with a red foil heart stuck to her drink lid. "You really said it to his face?" she whispered, low enough to stay beneath the radar of surrounding tables. Nalia nodded once. Her posture was upright, but her shoulders felt like stone. "I said no." Calm, clear, he heard me. Jade's mouth parted, part impressed, part anxious. "Griffin Rourke is not used to hearing no, especially not in public." Nalia did not reply. She did not need to. The air around them had already thickened with consequence. From the other side of the cafeteria, movement began. Griffin emerged from the west entrance like a general entering enemy territory. He was not alone. Bryce Lang flanked him, his arms folded tightly over his broad chest. Tanner Beck, quieter as always, trailed just behind, his expression unreadable. They walked in slow synchronization, part spectacle, part warning. The laughter at nearby tables began to fade. As they approached, Griffin's voice rose, calculatedly casual, but loud enough for the room to hear. "Hey, Nalia." She looked up, her expression still. "You got my card, right?" "I did," she answered. Her voice did not shake. "And I gave you my answer." Griffin paused. There it was again, that unshakable calm. His jaw flexed once. Bryce stepped forward, arms wide, feigning offense. "What? You too good for us now?" Tension rippled across the room. Heads began to turn. "Come on," Bryce continued, his voice dripping with mockery. "You sit there acting like some queen on a throne, like we should beg for your attention." "I did not ask for anyone to beg," Nalia said. "I simply said no." That word no struck like a thunderclap. Bryce scoffed, his laughter sharp. "Wow, that is how it is now? We do something nice and get slapped for it?" Tanner shifted uncomfortably behind them, his hands, tucked in his hoodie pockets, clenched once. Griffin's smile was tight now. "You know, Nalia," he said, leaning just slightly toward her, "most girls would kill to be invited to that party. I am not most girls. The silence was instant. Then someone at the nearby table choked on laughter. Phones began to rise like periscopes. Screens glowed. A few students whispered behind their palms, thrilled by the unfolding drama. Jade's hand brushed Nalia's under the table. "You do not have to." "I do," Nalia said softly. She rose to her feet. Around them, the cafeteria held its breath. "I said no," Nalia repeated. Her gaze met Griffin's without wavering. "Not because I wanted attention. Not because I hate you. Because I do not want to go. That should be enough." Bryce muttered something beneath his breath, something ugly. Griffin's nostrils flared. But it was Tanner who caught her gaze for a flicker of a moment. His eyes filled not with hostility, but uncertainty, as if he was no longer certain which side he was standing on. A click sounded in the background. Someone had recorded the entire exchange. A slim boy near the vending machines, his phone held subtly at chest level. He did not smile. He did not post. He simply saved the file, thumb hovering above the screen, undecided. Griffin's fists clenched, then released. "Fine," he said, his voice colder now. "You want to make a statement, Trent? Congratulations. You just did." He turned sharply, Bryce trailing behind with a final sneer. "Happy Valentine's, Queen." Tanner lingered. For half a second, it seemed he might speak. But then the moment passed, and he turned without a word. They walked away. The silence in the cafeteria lingered like smoke. Nalia exhaled slowly. Her chest was tight, but her spine remained straight. The roar of conversation returned only after she sat down. The rest of the day passed in fragments. In chemistry, the teacher spoke of molecular bonds, but Nalia's mind stayed trapped in the charged silence of the cafeteria. She could still feel the eyes, the looks, the labels being written across her skin in invisible ink. In gym, she caught sight of Tanner again. He moved half-heartedly through warm-ups, his usual sharpness dulled by something internal. At one point, he looked across the court to where Nalia sat on the bleachers, excused with a note due to personal discomfort. Their eyes met again, but he blinked first. He looked ashamed. She did not know why that mattered. By the end of sixth period, the hallway chatter had changed tone. Not angry, not loud. Just cold. Like a warning. It was nearly 4 o'clock in the afternoon when Nalia opened her locker. The first thing she noticed was the smell. Sharp. Chemical. Not the cheap perfume of candy grams or hairspray. Paint. Her eyes moved slowly, the way one looks at the site of a crash. Across the front of her locker, sprayed in black block letters, "Jungle Queen." The paint dripped slowly down the metal door, thick and wet. The Q was stylized into a crown, deliberate, designed, like someone had practiced. A few students nearby pretended not to see. One girl pulled her friend away quickly, muttering something too soft to catch. Nalia did not touch the paint. She did not scream. She simply stood there. She could hear her heart beating in her ears. The silence was different now. Not shock, not shame. It was calculation. She pulled out her phone and took a picture. 2, in fact. 1 wide, 1 close. Behind her, footsteps passed. A boy's voice said something about finally putting her back in her place. Nalia exhaled through her nose. A memory surfaced. Her mother, barefoot on the back porch, repeating the words that had become a kind of shield. "If you say no, mean it. If they cross the line, hold yours." She meant to walk away. Instead, she stepped back, sat down on the nearest bench, and opened a blank note in her phone. She began to write, and this time it was not poetry. It was record. The morning after the spray paint, the locker stood clean. Fresh gray, industrial dullness, the kind of gray that swallowed light and pretended nothing had ever happened. The janitors had arrived before dawn, scrubbing away the black letters with acetone and silence. But Nalia Trent still saw them. Even without the dripping stain, the memory of it clung to her skin like smoke. Jungle Queen. A crown made of mockery. And more than anything, the knowledge that someone had wanted her to read it, someone who wanted her to feel small. She arrived at the gym before anyone else, as always. The cheerleading locker room smelled like fabric spray and reheated body spray. Banners from previous championships curled slightly at the corners, their tape failing under years of humidity. She moved through the room with quiet precision, dropping her duffel bag on the bench, unzipping it, removing her uniform. She wore the same one she always had. Red and white, with black trim along the skirt hem. The logo, a tiger claw over a heart, was faded slightly, the stitching around her collar coming loose. She had hand-washed it the night before and dried it flat across her bedroom chair. It was clean, crisp, fitting. And apparently, it was no longer acceptable. Coach Halverson arrived precisely at 7:45 in the morning. Her whistle was already hanging around her neck, the clipboard tucked tight against her chest. She was a woman who believed in discipline, tradition, and the kind of order that left little room for nuance. "Nalia," she said, not unkindly but not gently either. A word. The other girls glanced up. The clatter of lockers quieted, as if the room itself leaned in to listen. Nalia stood. "Yes, Coach?" Coach Halverson motioned toward the corner of the room, just out of earshot. "I have received some concerns," the woman began. Her tone was clipped, bureaucratic. "About what?" "Your uniform." A pause. "It is outdated, not regulation, compliant with the updates from last season. Several parents noticed it at the last game and asked why the team does not appear unified." Nalia blinked slowly. "The rest of the team was issued new uniforms through the booster club. I was told there were no extras in my size." Coach Halverson's eyes narrowed slightly, as if the fact displeased her too. But she did not address it. "I suggest you request a replacement today. The supply closet has a few spares." Nalia inhaled through her nose. She wanted to say, "You mean someone's mother complained about the black girl in the faded outfit?" She wanted to ask, "If you really cared about unity, why did no one offer to order one for me in the first place?" But she said none of it. "Yes, Coach," she replied quietly. Coach Halverson gave a curt nod and walked away, her clipboard clapping softly against her hip. The rest of the team avoided eye contact. Only Jade met her gaze, the apology clear in her eyes. But apology could not sew a new collar. It was during third period that Nalia made her way to the equipment storage room. The gym was empty, except for the echo of a bouncing ball down the far hallway. The school buzzed around her in disconnected rhythms, classroom lectures, sneakers scuffing across linoleum, the hum of overhead lights that never slept. The supply room was at the far end of the gym, tucked behind a steel door with peeling paint and a stubborn hinge. Inside, the air was colder. Dust coated the shelves. Boxes of unused uniforms sat stacked along one wall, the tops half open like mouths yawning in protest. She moved carefully, scanning the labels. Nothing in her size, nothing in her shade. A memory stirred at the edge of her mind. Not loud, not sudden, but deep. A warm afternoon, the sun dropping low over their backyard in Georgia, her mother kneeling on the grass beside her, her dark hair tied back with a red bandana. The scent of fresh earth, of sweat, of home. "Come here," her mother had said. "You are not just going to learn how to fall, you are going to learn how to rise." They had stood barefoot on the grass, side by side. Nalia, only 8 at the time, barely tall enough to reach her mother's shoulder. She remembered the way the woman's hands felt, firm, patient, steady. "First lesson," her mother had whispered, "you do not fight because you want to. You fight because silence becomes unbearable." And then she had shown her the first step. A wrist grab, a pivot, a shift in balance so fluid it looked like dance. If they pull, you redirect. If they shove, you center. You never fight to destroy, you fight to reclaim. That memory lived in Nalia's bones, stitched into her muscle memory, buried beneath years of holding her breath in classrooms where her name was mispronounced and her silence mistaken for compliance. And now, standing alone in a cold supply closet, she let the memory steady her. She reached for a uniform folded neatly on the second shelf. It was too small, the wrong cut, clearly designed for someone half her size, but it would have to do for now. She held it in her arms and turned toward the door and froze. Griffin, Bryce, Tanner. They stood in the doorway, silhouettes backlit by the overhead lights of the gym. 3 shadows cast long against the polished floor. Nalia's fingers tightened around the uniform bundle in her arms. None of them spoke at first. It was Griffin who moved first, stepping into the room with the measured grace of someone used to taking space. Bryce followed, taller and broader, eyes glittering with something unreadable. Tanner lingered behind, one hand pressed to the doorframe. "Well," Griffin said, his voice light, too light. "Looks like you are finally getting that new uniform." Nalia did not respond. Bryce chuckled. "About time. That old one made you look like you were auditioning for a different team." Griffin's eyes moved slowly from the bundle in her hands to her face. "Just thought we would drop by. Make sure you are feeling included." "Included?" she repeated. Her voice was even, sharp as glass. "Yes," Griffin said, leaning in slightly. "We would hate for you to feel left out." The air in the room shifted, thickened. Tanner shifted from one foot to the other. He looked as though he might say something, but did not. Nalia's heart beat once, then again. "You do not fight because you want to. You fight because silence becomes unbearable." She placed the uniform bundle gently on the nearby shelf. Then she stepped back. Her breath was steady, her spine unshaken, but her silence was nearly gone. The door shut behind them with a sound that did not belong in a school. It was too final, too sharp, too deliberate. Nalia turned fully now, the overhead light flickering once above her like a slow blink. She stood in the cramped supply room, one arm resting against the metal shelf behind her. Her breath remained steady, but inside her chest, something primal stirred, a pressure gathering just beneath the surface. Griffin took 2 more steps forward. His shoes squeaked on the scuffed linoleum. Bryce followed, a half-smile playing on his face, though his eyes were already cold. Behind them, still by the door, Tanner lingered in the shadows. His hands remained buried in his pockets. His eyes, however, were fixed on Nalia. No one said anything. The air inside the room tightened. Nalia's voice, when it came, was clear and composed. "You are in the wrong place." Griffin tilted his head. "We just wanted to talk," Bryce snorted. "Yeah, talk." Griffin's gaze swept the cramped room. "Funny how you are always alone when things happen to you." Nalia did not respond. She shifted her weight slightly, aligning her feet with quiet precision. Her fingers curled loosely at her sides. "You think you embarrassed us in front of the whole school?" Griffin continued, his tone light but laced with a growing edge. "Standing there, all noble and defiant? Saying no? Like it meant something?" "It did mean something," Nalia said. "It still does." Griffin's smile turned into a sneer. Bryce moved first. One long stride forward. His arm shot out and caught the collar of her cheerleading top, fingers curling around the fabric near her shoulder. It happened in less than a breath. A sound, sharp, splitting, ripped through the air as he yanked the fabric downward. The stitching tore, snapping at the seam, and the red and white uniform split open across her chest. Her sports bra, plain, white, and modest, was exposed beneath the fraying fabric. Griffin laughed. It was not a sound of amusement. It was the sound of someone trying to reduce another human being to pieces. "Now you look like you belong in the closet," he said, voice low, almost gleeful. Nalia froze. Not from fear, not from shame, but from something older, something deeper, a silence that had lived in her for far too long. She remembered her mother's voice, firm and warm, echoing across the backyard where wildflowers grew through the fence posts. "You do not fight because you want to. You fight because silence becomes unbearable." And in that moment, silence became unbearable. She moved. One hand shot up, grabbing Bryce's wrist, the other locked across his elbow, twisting his arm down and to the side. He was strong, stronger than her, but he was untrained, overconfident, and entirely unprepared. She pivoted, grounding her weight, and dropped her center of gravity. Then she pulled. Bryce flew. His feet lifted from the ground, momentum carrying him backward in a graceless arc. His body slammed into the shelving unit with a metallic crash, sending bins and spare basketballs tumbling onto the floor. The shelf rattled but held. Bryce crumpled beside it, stunned. Wind knocked from his lungs. Silence. Griffin's expression shattered, first confusion, then rage. "You crazy?" I said no, Nalia interrupted. Her voice did not rise. It cut. She took one step back, recentering. Her torn uniform hung from her shoulder, the collar limp and exposed, but she stood upright, composed, not a tear on her cheek, not a tremble in her fingers. Griffin advanced, his fists clenched, but Tanner finally moved. "Stop," Tanner said, his voice cracking from disuse. Griffin turned sharply. "What?" "She is alone. She is not armed. And you?" Tanner's voice dropped. "You just let him rip her shirt." Griffin's mouth twitched. "So?" Tanner's hands were shaking now. "So I am done pretending this is okay." For a long second, no one spoke. Bryce groaned from the floor, clutching his side. Nalia's eyes locked onto Tanner's. There was something in them, something bruised and uncertain. Not an ally. Not yet. But a fracture in the wall. Griffin stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. "You are pathetic," he spat. "I know," Tanner replied. The door behind them creaked open. Footsteps echoed outside the gym. Voices from the hallway. Coach Halverson. Nalia stepped back further into the room. She picked up the spare uniform she had dropped earlier, cradled it with one arm across her chest, and walked past the boys without flinching. Tanner stepped aside. Griffin did not. But he also did not move. She passed him like wind through dead leaves. Outside the supply room, the gym was flooded with white light, the sound of bouncing balls, coaches calling names, whistles echoing off polished wood. Nalia walked into that brightness, her torn uniform still trailing from her shoulder like a flag that had seen battle. And yet she walked tall. The door clicked shut behind her. Inside, the three boys stood amid scattered equipment and silence. And somewhere in the distance, a camera phone was being unlocked. The first message arrived just after dawn. Nalia had barely opened her eyes when her phone buzzed against the nightstand. The light outside was still thin, silver through the slats of her blinds. She blinked once, then again, trying to gather the shape of her thoughts. Her body ached, not in the way bruises announce themselves, but in the quiet aftermath of restraint. Her shoulder, where the uniform had torn, her wrists from gripping too tightly during the throw, her jaw from clenching words she never spoke aloud. She reached for her phone. No contact name, just a notification from an anonymous email. Subject, "I am sorry." The message was short, barely 6 lines. "I should have said something. I should have stopped him. I was afraid. Of him. Of what would happen if I did not go along. You did not deserve what we did. I am sorry. Please do not tell anyone I wrote this." No name. No signature. But Nalia knew. She knew who stood in the doorway. Who looked away. Who flinched when Bryce reached forward. Tanner. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She did not respond. Not yet. Instead, she slid the phone to the side and sat up, swinging her legs over the edge of the bed. Morning had come, and with it, consequences. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Rose Hill High buzzed with the false calm of pre-chaos. Students moved through the halls like bees, unsure which direction to swarm. There was a current in the air, static in the way eyes lingered too long, in the way conversations hushed when certain names passed between lips. Nalia walked through it all with her head up and her replacement uniform pressed smooth against her frame. It was too snug across the chest and too short at the waist, but it covered her, and today that was enough. Outside room 312, someone was waiting. Owen Chen stood beside the media lab door, shifting from foot to foot. He wore a black Rose Hill hoodie, 2 sizes too big, and glasses that always seemed to slide halfway down his nose. In his hands was a school-issued laptop, held close like a secret. He looked up when Nalia approached. His expression was unreadable, neither pity nor admiration, but something more solemn. "I need to show you something," he said. Nalia paused. "Is this about yesterday?" Owen nodded. "The storage room, the cameras." He turned the laptop toward her and pressed play. The video began with silence, grainy at first, then sharpening. The storage room. Her standing near the shelf. Griffin stepping forward. Bryce reaching out. The rip of fabric. Her throw. The crash. Every detail captured from above. From the far corner where the camera lens had always been assumed broken. Except it was not broken anymore. "We fixed it last week," Owen explained quietly. "The club got permission to upgrade a few of the blind spots. We did not tell anyone yet. We wanted to test everything first." She watched herself throw Bryce again, this time from a different angle. In slow motion, her stance looked deliberate, her face composed, not angry, just controlled. Owen paused the video. "It is all here," he said. "The whole thing. The voices, the threats, the tear, the throw. You never escalated. You defended yourself." Nalia swallowed. "Are you going to release it?" Owen hesitated. "I already backed it up to 3 cloud servers. I have a version secured with a timestamp. I wanted to ask you first." She looked at the paused frame on the screen. Herself, one arm extended mid-throw, the shelf in the background shaking from the impact. She nodded. "Release it," she said. Owen exhaled. By 10 o'clock in the morning, the school had changed. The video spread through private group chats, then the Rose Hill class server, then among students who usually had nothing to do with cheerleaders or football players. It did not go public. Not yet. But the walls of secrecy had begun to bend. Some gasped. Some watched in silence. Others hit replay, again and again. By noon, the whispers had turned into dialogue. She was cornered. She warned them. She barely touched him. He went flying because he was charging at her. Phones hovered in the air like anxious birds. And then came the hashtags. #Stand with Nalia. It appeared first on a student's Instagram story, superimposed over a freeze frame of the video. Nalia standing, her uniform torn but her posture defiant. Within 20 minutes, it spread to TikTok. Then came the response. Protect Our Boys, started by a student on the baseball team, shared by a group of senior girls who often dated football players, accompanied by a caption. A moment taken out of context can ruin a future. Griffin and Bryce deserve to be heard too. The school became a divided map. Lockers were marked with subtle signs, hearts drawn in red Sharpie for supporters of Nalia, blue arrows for the opposing side. Stickers with the tiger claw logo started appearing, some scratched through with an X. At the cafeteria, 2 tables refused to sit near each other. A student in a media class designed digital badges, "Believe her and boys are people too." It was no longer just a story. It was a battle of narrative. Pixel by pixel, frame by frame, Nalia's truth had been made visible. And so had everyone else's opinions. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Nalia stood outside the gym, staring at the brick wall across from the courtyard. Her phone buzzed with a dozen more messages, some supportive, some cruel, one from a girl she barely knew. "You were so calm, I would have broken his nose." Another read, "Why would you let them get that close? Seems suspicious." Nalia closed her phone. Behind her, footsteps. She turned to see Jade approaching, a look of concern etched across her face. "Have you seen the hashtags?" Jade asked softly. "I have," Nalia said. "You know this is not going away, right?" "I know." Jade placed a hand on her arm. "You did the right thing." Nalia nodded. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "I just did what I had to." She did not say what haunted her the most, that even with evidence, there were people willing to twist the frame, blur the picture, protect the powerful. Her truth was in pixels now, but the world still chose what it wanted to see. The night did not pass. It hovered. The clock on Nalia's nightstand glowed faintly, 3:40 in the morning, then 4 o'clock, then 4:30, but sleep never came. It was not the sharpness of fear that kept her awake, but the dull ache of betrayal and the cold echo of a world too quick to doubt. Outside her window, Cold Creek lay still. The streets were washed in silver by the moonlight, the town's perfect illusion intact. No one driving by would guess that a war had begun inside the walls of Rose Hill High, a war of silence, of suggestion, of which truth would rise loudest. Inside, Nalia sat curled on the floor beside her bed, knees to chest, her father's old hoodie wrapped around her like a borrowed memory. The hoodie still smelled faintly of lavender and pencil shavings from when she used to sneak it during study nights. Her notebook lay open in her lap, its pages a mix of spilled thoughts and silent pleas. She began to write. February 14th. Valentine's Day. They say silence is strength, that holding your tongue is grace, that staying still is discipline. But silence is also a cage, and sometimes it is the loudest scream no one hears. She paused, the words blurred, tears welling not from pain but from the quiet weight pressing against her chest. She turned the page and drew a circle, then inside it, a small line curved like a wave. Her mother used to say every movement began in the breath, and every breath told the story of a fighter's soul. Herr Pin stille. In the silence, her memory filled in the gaps. She saw herself at 8 years old, barefoot on the backyard mat, watching her mother kneel before her. The scent of grass and soil still lingered in that memory, and so did the sun against her skin. Her mother had taken her hands gently and said, "You do not fight to prove something. You fight because silence becomes unbearable. When the world stops listening, you speak with your stance, with your breath, with your stillness." Nalia had nodded, but she had not understood it then, not fully. Now she did. She rose slowly from the floor. The hallway mirror waited outside her door like an old witness. She stepped into its gaze and faced herself. The reflection stared back, her face pale, shadows beneath her eyes, and her body stiff with the exhaustion of a girl who never asked for a fight but was born into one. She reached out and lifted the torn cheer uniform from her closet. The fabric felt cold, foreign now, as if it belonged to someone else. Her fingers brushed the jagged tear near the collar, and her hand trembled, not from fear, from memory. From the knowledge that something had been stolen, her peace, her belonging, and yet something else had taken root in its place. Resolve. She stared at her reflection, holding the ruined uniform to her chest. And for the first time in days, she let herself cry. Not because she was weak, but because she finally knew she was not. The morning light came reluctantly. By 7:30, the town had begun to move. Lawn sprinklers hummed, mailboxes opened, birds chattered with indifference to human wounds. But Nalia remained under her blanket, curled into the silence. She had made up her mind. She would not go. She would not walk through the whispers and stares, through the noise of judgment disguised as curiosity. Not today. She buried herself deeper into the quilt, letting her breath match the rhythm of the world outside, slow, hushed, invisible. Until someone knocked. "Open the door, Nalia." It was Jade. Her voice was muffled by the door but insistent, sharp enough to cut through resignation. Nalia did not answer. Jade knocked again, louder this time. "I know you are awake, and if you think I'm going to let you hide while your name gets dragged by people who do not even know how to spell it, you are wrong." Footsteps, then silence, then the sound of a key turning in the lock. Nalia sat up, startled. "How do you—" "I begged your mom for an emergency key. Now get up." Jade strode into the room like a thunderstorm. Her braid was tucked under a black hoodie, and she held a thermos in one hand and a duffel in the other. "I brought tea and backup clothes." I do not want to go." Jade sat at the edge of the bed, offering the thermos. "You do not have to want to, but you have to choose." Nalia stared at her. Jade's voice softened. People are already choosing for you, Nalia. You can stay here and let them twist the story, or you can show up and remind them who you are." Silence fell between them. Then slowly, wordlessly, Nalia reached for the thermos. She took a sip, chamomile and cinnamon. Warmth spread down her throat, and she closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she nodded. "Give me 15 minutes." Jade smiled. "That is my girl." By 8:45, the whispers had reached national ears. Mrs. Danton, the journalism teacher, received the first call while walking to her car. 10 minutes later, a white SUV bearing the logo of Channel 8 parked across the street from the school. A man in a blazer stepped out, holding a microphone and wearing a practiced expression of concern. Another crew arrived shortly after, from a smaller regional network. Then came the local newspaper, but none of them asked for Nalia. None asked for Jade. None asked for the Chen boy with the footage. Instead, the microphones turned to a manicured front lawn at the edge of town. The Rourke household. A tall house with navy shutters, a white porch, and a mailbox shaped like a football helmet. By 9:30, the headlines were forming. Rourke family speaks out after viral incident at Rose Hill High. Football captain's parents demand investigation into alleged ambush. Oh, Griffin's future at risk, say family attorneys. They never mentioned her name. Just the girl. Just the altercation. Just the unfortunate video that does not show the full story. Back at school, Nalia stepped out of Jade's car and watched a group of juniors scroll through their phones in the courtyard. One of them looked up, met her eyes, and looked away. Inside the main hallway, someone had placed a printout on her locker. "Due process for our athletes." Oh, beside it, someone else had scribbled in red ink, "And justice for our girls." Nalia stood before her locker, heart beating slowly, gaze steady. The silence was ending. But whose voice would rise above the noise, that was yet to be decided. By 8 o'clock in the morning, the town of Cold Creek no longer belonged to itself. It belonged to the headlines. News vans had multiplied like ants around a fallen tree. Tripods stood like metal sentries near the school gates. Students passed them with a mix of unease and curiosity, ducking their heads or adjusting their smiles, unsure which face to wear under the growing glare of national attention. But behind the glow of camera lights and trending hashtags, something quieter had begun, a countercurrent. Not loud, not obvious, but insidious. It began with a carefully crafted statement released by the Rourke family. Typed in black ink on white paper, read aloud by a well-dressed attorney on the Rourke front porch, it began like this: "The Rourke family is deeply saddened by the mischaracterizations surrounding our son Griffin. What occurred was an unfortunate misunderstanding taken out of context, one in which a moment of youthful immaturity has been unfairly weaponized against a good boy with a clean record, a strong GPA, and a full scholarship in sight." The cameras captured every word. None of them captured Nalia's silence. That same afternoon, a podcast titled Southern Courage released a special episode titled The Real Victims at Rose Hill High. Within the hour, it climbed to the top 10 on Spotify's trending chart. The guest was Mr. Roland Pierce, a long-tenured history teacher at Rose Hill High, known for his conservative views and his unwavering loyalty to the school's football program. His voice crackled through earbuds across town, thick with practiced sincerity. "I have known Griffin Rourke since he was in the 6th grade," Mr. Pierce said. "He is not perfect. No one is. But he is respectful, dedicated, and frankly, I worry about what we are teaching our boys when one mistake turns into national scandal. We are feeding them to wolves. This is not justice. This is public execution." The host nodded, solemn. "You think the media is distorting this?" "Absolutely," Pierce replied. "People are so hungry for a villain they will make one." Griffin did not attack anyone. There was confusion, tension. But this young lady, Nalia, chose to react physically. And now our boys are the ones paying the price. The word "our" hung like smoke in the air. By sunset, number "Let Him Speak" trended alongside number "Protect Our Boys." Inside the Chen family home, Owen sat at his desk, staring at his laptop screen. The video file original untouched was still there. So was the timestamp, the audio, the angle that captured everything. And yet, outside his window, truth had become negotiable. His phone buzzed. "You are disgusting. Traitor. Hope you enjoy being the school rat." He scrolled in silence. His fingers trembled slightly, but his face remained still. From the kitchen, his mother called gently in Mandarin, offering warm bao buns. He did not respond. Not yet. He could not eat when his hands felt like they were holding a matchstick house set to burn. He opened a new email, drafted a response, then deleted it. He was not ready to fight the entire town. Not alone. Across town, Jade sat on the edge of Nalia's bed, knees pulled to her chest. The curtains were drawn. A single ray of evening sun touched the corner of the room, casting long, uncertain shadows. Her phone was in her lap. A screenshot was glowing on the screen. It was a message in the cheer team group chat. "If you are still hanging with her, you are not one of us. You either stand with Cold Creek or stand outside it. Ask Jade who she really represents." She stared at the screen for a long time. Her throat tightened, but she made no sound. The sound had already been taken from her. Not by force, but by choice. The unspoken rule of their town. Do not speak too loud. Do not betray the hierarchy. And above all, do not side with the wrong girl. She looked over at Nalia, who was sitting at the small desk, flipping through a dusty judo manual her mother once gave her. "Do you regret it?" Jade asked. Nalia turned. "Regret what?" "Telling the truth." There was no hesitation in Nalia's voice. "Number." Jade nodded once. But inside her, something splintered. A crack between loyalty and belonging. A fracture between history and justice. She had grown up with those girls. She had known their birthday cake preferences, their crushes, their summer camp stories, and now they were calling her a traitor. Not because she lied, but because she did not. That night, the high school auditorium held a parent-led town meeting. The principal, Coach Dorian, and a few board members stood on stage behind a long table. Below them, the rows filled with faces, some angry, some confused, most familiar. Mrs. Rourke was seated in the front row, pearl earrings shining under the harsh lights. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap. Owen's father was farther back, not speaking, just watching. Jade's parents were absent. They were on a work trip in Tallahassee and had not returned her messages. Nalia was not invited. But she watched the live stream on her phone. Coach Dorian took the microphone. "We ask for patience, for balance. These are still kids we are talking about." A father stood. "My son plays football. He says Griffin is being threatened. Where is the line between standing up for girls and crucifying our boys?" Another mother stood. "My daughter is terrified to go to school now, not because of violence, but because she feels like she will be labeled a racist just for staying neutral." The room hummed with agreement, and in her bedroom, Nalia felt her heart sink, because no one had said her name, not once, not in defense, not in empathy, not in humanity, just the girl, just the fight, just the disruption, as if her silence was a convenience they had come to expect. At school the next morning, the shift was visible. Students who had once stood quietly in the hallway now whispered with pointed glances. Owen's locker was covered in sticky notes, most blank, some with messages like "leave" or "tattle much." Jade found gum stuck under her cheer bench. At lunch, no one sat with them except Nalia. Even the teachers had grown quieter. Only Miss Ellis, the art teacher, paused briefly while passing them in the hallway. "Keep your head up," she said to Owen. History always sides with truth. Eventually. But even her voice trembled when she said it. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the pine trees and the wind stirred Cold Creek's flag outside City Hall, another headline surfaced. Podcast guest accused of bias. Petition to suspend teacher Roland Pierce gathers 10,000 signatures. The backlash had begun, but so had the targeting. Owen received a message in his inbox. "We know where your sister goes to daycare." Jade's car had its windshield wipers ripped off in the school parking lot. Fear did not always scream. Sometimes it whispered, slowly, like smoke under a locked door. And yet, in that growing darkness, one truth remained. Nalia had not raised her voice, but the world had already begun choosing whose version of the story would be remembered. It began with a wall. By 7:30 in the morning, just outside the gymnasium doors, a new symbol had appeared overnight, spray-painted in bold crimson and black across the white brick. A clenched fist, jagged with motion, next to a heart split clean down the middle. No words, no names, just image. But everyone knew what it meant. By 8 o'clock, half the school had already taken sides. Some wore black ribbons looped around their wrists, quiet support for Nalia, for Owen, for truth. Others walked defiantly in varsity jackets, sleeves rolled up, with makeshift pins that read, "Number, Protect Our Boys," scrawled in red marker. The hallways, once merely indifferent, now vibrated with tension. Doors slammed harder. Side conversations paused whenever someone walked past. Laughter sounded like accusation. Even silence felt weaponized, divided not by walls, but by which truth you believed. Noah stood in the media lab, elbows planted on the table, watching the render bar crawl across the bottom of his screen. His hands trembled, not from fear, but the weight of what he had uncovered. The clip was under 3 minutes long, but it was damning. There was no sound, just security footage from the same equipment room, dated nearly a year ago. It showed Bryce guiding another girl, Anna Liscombe, into the shadows behind the lockers. She hesitated. He blocked the door. No altercation occurred, but her body language was clear. Nervous, uncomfortable. Bryce's stance towered in comparison. The clip ended with her pushing past him, running out. Noah had found it buried in an old folder, archived by the media club during a camera lens test. Forgotten, ignored, until now. He exported the file, uploaded it to a private drive, and wrote a caption. "Patterns matter. Silence should not be survival." Number still watching. Number divide and echo. Then he hit post. Within the hour, the video was everywhere, shared in group chats, reposted in Instagram stories, embedded in Discord servers that stretched beyond Cold Creek. At lunch, Anna sat stone-faced with her tray untouched, tears rimming her eyes. Several girls joined her in silence, including one of the junior cheerleaders who once mocked Nalia. Something was breaking, and something else was sharpening. Jade found Tanner by the empty bleachers behind the field. He was alone, slouched with elbows on his knees, hoodie up despite the heat. A bruise was blooming across the side of his jaw. She sat down beside him, no words at first, just whined, brushing the tall grass and the rusted chain-link fence. Finally, she said, "They will keep doing this, until someone stops them." Tanner did not lift his head. "You think that someone is me? I think it should be." His jaw clenched. "You saw what happened last time. I said no. That bruise? That was not from a game." Jade turned to him. "You wrote to Nalia. You wanted to apologize, but that was still in the dark." She placed a folded paper between them. "Come into the light." He stared at the paper, did not touch it. "They will destroy me," he said. "Maybe," Jade replied. "But maybe you will save someone else. And maybe, just maybe, you will finally stop feeling like you are living someone else's life." Ips. That cut deeper than she expected. His shoulders stiffened. A long silence followed. Then, slowly, Tanner reached for the paper. The emergency disciplinary hearing was scheduled for 3 o'clock that afternoon. The auditorium, used just weeks ago for school plays and pep rallies, had been transformed into a tribunal space. Folded chairs aligned in stiff rows, microphones wired to a central podium. On stage, the 3-member disciplinary board. In the center sat Principal Halbrook, expression unreadable. To his right, Mrs. Danvers, the district's legal representative, and to the left, Mr. Ellis, Tanner's father. He sat with spine rigid, fingers laced, mouth tight in a line. A polished watch glinted from his wrist. He did not look at his son, who now stood just outside the doors, waiting to be called. Inside the hallway, Nalia and Jade sat on a bench, watching Tanner through the glass. He paced, stopped, looked at his hands, shook them out. "You do not have to be perfect in there," Nalia said quietly. "Just be true." He nodded once, but his eyes were distant. "I am not afraid of Griffin," he whispered, "or Bryce, or what they will say. I am afraid of my father looking at me like I betrayed him." Nalia did not blink. "Maybe he needs to be betrayed, just this once." The door opened. "Mr. Ellis," the secretary called. Tanner inhaled. Once, twice, and then he stepped inside, where a town was waiting. As the doors closed behind him, the sun began to lower through the auditorium windows, throwing long shadows across the floor. Half the student council was present. So was the school psychologist. Owen was seated in the third row, notebook in hand, his jaw set. Across the aisle, Griffin leaned back in his seat, arms crossed, flanked by his father and Bryce's parents. Mr. Rourke looked smug. Bryce just looked bored. But when Tanner stepped to the microphone, everything shifted. His voice was shaky at first. "My name is Tanner Ellis," he began, "and I was there." A murmur rippled through the room. "I was in the equipment room when Nalia was cornered. I did not stop it. I should have, but I did not." He turned, briefly, toward his father. "I was afraid, not of them, of disappointing you." Mr. Ellis's mouth twitched, whether from anger or regret. It was impossible to say. Tanner continued. "Bryce did more than tease. He tore her uniform." Griffin laughed. I froze. "And afterward, they told me what to say. Who to blame? What would happen if I did not?" He paused. "I am saying this now because silence is no longer an option I want to live with." Gasps, whispers. A few chairs shifted. Griffin's face turned red. Bryce stood up. "He is lying." Principal Halbrook raised a hand. "Sit down, Bryce." Tanner's hands trembled, but his spine stayed straight. "I am not lying." He stepped back. The room fell into a silence so thick it seemed to weigh the air itself. Mr. Ellis did not say a word, not when his son walked off the stage, not when the room erupted in noise, not when history changed. Outside the school, the wall was painted again that night. This time, the fist had been softened, its fingers loosened, open, offering the shape of a hand reaching out. Next to it, the same broken heart. But someone had added a gold thread across the split, as if someone had tried to stitch it closed. The symbol was no longer a threat. It was a wound and a wish. The auditorium was not made for silence. Not this kind. Not the kind that holds its breath. Not the kind that makes wood groan beneath still shoes and fluorescent lights buzz like accusations. Nalia stood center stage. One microphone, one sheet of paper in her hand, 1,000 unseen weights pressing on her ribs. The hearing had expanded into a full school assembly. By order of the superintendent, mandatory attendance, parents permitted, media barred. For now, she could not see the audience past the glare of stage lights, but she could feel them. 100 students barely breathing, teachers with arms folded, some scribbling, some scowling. Griffin sat in the front row. So did his father. Principal Halbrook sat off to the side, lips pressed into a quiet prayer that no one dared say aloud. Nalia looked down at the paper she had written 3 nights ago, when sleep had refused to find her. Her hands did not shake. Not anymore. She began to read. "There was a night, after my first week at Cold Creek, when I could not sleep. My mother had warned me that silence was never really silent, that it grows teeth when no one watches, that if you do not speak, silence will speak for you, and it will lie. That night I wrote this line in my journal. Sometimes I wish I were invisible, but only because it hurts less than being seen and not believed. That wish came true, but not in the way I thought. Whispers moved across the audience like wind over dry leaves. Nalia's voice remained steady. To the boys who cornered me, I do not want revenge. I want safety. I want breath. I want to know that the next girl who walks these halls with her shoulders folded in will not be taught her silence is protection. To those who watched, I forgive your silence, but silence cannot last forever. She folded the paper, stepped back. The room was still, but it was not quiet. It was full of something louder, something rising. Griffin looked at the floor. His father whispered something in his ear. Griffin did not reply. Nalia descended the stage slowly, but something had already shifted. By the end of the day, the news came swift and sharp. Owen was removed from the media club. No hearing, no warning, just a form letter and a sealed envelope. He found it taped to his locker like a quiet punishment. Breached internal policy regarding unauthorized footage and defamation of student community. Noah stared at it with disbelief. I posted it. He archived it, Noah argued, pacing near the student center. Intent does not matter here, Jade said bitterly. Optics do. Oh. Owen crumpled the letter in his fist. It was the truth. That is what they are afraid of, Jade murmured. Nalia's punishment came by email. Not even from the principal, but from the district office. Her academic scholarship had been temporarily suspended, pending review of conduct that may damage institutional image. She reread the message 3 times, fingers clenched against the phone screen. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but fury. Not one of the boys had lost anything. Not yet. She had lost 2 meals and a future. And still, she was expected to smile. Tanner stood outside the administrative office, holding a small spiral notebook. He had not meant to speak again. Not after facing his father. Not after the glare Griffin shot him in the hallway that morning. But something about the words Nalia read, something about the truth wrapped in pain and still spoken, had cracked something inside him wide open. The door to the administrative conference room opened. He stepped in. Inside sat a few school board members, a student affairs officer, and Principal Halbrook. A camera recorded the session. This one was official. Tanner cleared his throat. I need to say something, this time, everything. He placed the notebook on the table, opened it. 3 days before the incident, we were in Griffin's basement, he began. He had a whiteboard. He wrote, "No marks, no bruises, just fear." It was not a joke. He took a breath. They wanted to send her a message. Not to hurt her permanently, just enough so she would be scared to speak again. A pause. Then he added, "That was the exact phrase Mr. Rourke used when he walked in." Principal Halbrook looked up sharply. "Griffin's father?" Tanner nodded. "He was there. I do not know if he meant it literally. But it was said. Clearly. Calmly. Just make her scared enough not to speak again." The silence that followed was not shock. It was strategy. One of the board members wrote something in a small notepad. Another whispered into a walkie. Within 10 minutes, Tanner was asked to stay behind while 2 administrators walked swiftly down the hall and entered the principal's office, shutting the door behind them. 15 minutes later, a call was made to the Cold Creek Police Department. And for the first time, the phrase coordinated intimidation appeared in the official record. That night, the school's digital bulletin board was hacked. For exactly 6 minutes, it displayed the following message. In white text against black, the truth has weight, and it is heavier than fear. The weight of words echoes do not fade. Students who saw it described the moment as eerie, beautiful, unshakable. Some took photos, others just stared. But one thing was certain. Something had shifted. Again. And this time, it was not going back. In the early morning hours, as the town still slept and the fog curled along the narrow streets like a ghost with memory, 2 unmarked sedans arrived at the Rourke residence. Inside, a detective and a district attorney prepared to ask the first question in what could become the biggest investigation the town had seen in over a decade. Because it was no longer about a fight, no longer about a broken uniform or a bruised reputation. It was about planning, about power, about whether silence had been weaponized by more than just students. And now, at long last, the silence had spoken back. It began with a whisper, a quiet murmur in the morning corridors, eyes that glanced over shoulders, hands that hovered above lockers before pulling away. The kind of silence that does not grow from peace, but from waiting for something to break. At precisely 9 o'clock in the morning, the bell rang, but no one moved toward class. Instead, one by one, students began walking to the center courtyard. It was not loud. It was not chaotic. It was organized, deliberate, powerful in its stillness. Some carried handmade signs. "We believe her." "Safety is not political." "Number the weight of words." Others wore white shirts with a single red handprint across the chest, a symbol that had quietly emerged online the night before. A mark not of violence, but of the invisible pressure every victim carries in silence. Principal Halbrook stepped onto the office balcony, eyes wide as the crowd swelled beneath him. From freshmen to seniors, even a few teachers standing among the students, heads held high. Nalia stood near the front, no sign, no chant, just her presence, calm, resolute. She did not look toward Griffin, who stood near the gym doors, arms folded, flanked by a few loyal followers who muttered behind clenched jaws. But not everyone remained silent. At 10 o'clock, a counter-presence arrived. Parents, dozens of them. They stood at the outer edge of the school gates, arms crossed, sunglasses on, signs in bold block letters. "Do not politicize our schools. False accusations hurt real families. Stand with our boys." A woman in a beige pantsuit stepped forward and spoke into a megaphone. "We respect peaceful expression, but schools are not battlegrounds. Let our children learn in peace. Let the process play out. This hysteria is dangerous." The words floated over the courtyard like smoke from a dying fire. Nalia's fingers curled at her sides. Her legs ached to move, but where? To shout? To weep? To disappear? Instead, she stepped forward. No microphone. No megaphone. Just one small envelope clutched in her hand. Old paper. Faded red ink. The Valentine's Day letter. The one Griffin had slipped into her locker 2 weeks before the assault. A note wrapped in lies and mock tenderness. The kind that pretends affection while circling prey. She unfolded it slowly, letting the audience see it in full view. Then she reached into her backpack, pulled out a single silver lighter, flipped the lid, and set the paper on fire. Gasps erupted, some in awe, some in horror. The flame danced along the edge, blackening the heart-shaped border, curling Griffin's scripted words into smoke. She dropped the burning letter into a small tin tray brought by Jade. The flame hissed out in a breath of ash. Someone captured it on video. Within minutes, the clip would circle across every group chat in Cold Creek. She burned the lie. We saw it. Number, burn it all. Number, no more silence. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the backlash arrived, faster than anyone expected. A petition titled, "Request for Expulsion, Nalia Trent," appeared on a local community forum run by the Cold Creek Parent Coalition. Its justification was written in polished legalese, but the meaning was clear. Nalia Trent has disrupted academic peace, incited protest on school property, and endangered student unity with public spectacle. It gained over 400 digital signatures within 6 hours. Comments beneath the post varied from subtle concern to thinly veiled venom. "She seems unstable. Fire on school grounds? Our boys should not suffer for misunderstandings. Maybe Cold Creek is not the right place for her." Nalia read each line like a slow wound reopening. Jade tried to yank the phone from her hand. "Do not read them. They do not know you. They do not want to." Nalia pulled the phone back. "They do not need to know me. They only need to blame me." "You!" Owen was pacing in the hallway outside the student council room. "We should draft a counter-petition." "The school board cannot act on community pressure alone," Jade replied. "They already are. You were removed. She was suspended. What more proof do we need?" Noah stood by the vending machines, silent. When Nalia caught his eye, he nodded once. "Let them build their fire," he said quietly. "We will give them the match." That night, Nalia sat in her bedroom, the curtains drawn. She stared at the soot-stained tray now sitting on her desk. The burnt corners of Griffin's letters still curled at the edges. Her mother knocked once. "Come in," Nalia said softly. Her mother entered holding a black folder. "I got a message," she said, "from the board. They are reviewing your eligibility for next semester." Nalia looked away. "I know." Her mother sat on the edge of the bed. "I wanted to protect you, bring you here for safety, better schools, better chances." She looked at her daughter now, wrists folded in her lap, eyes hollow from too many battles for someone too young. "I was wrong to think silence could shield you." Nalia did not answer. Instead, she asked, "Do you regret teaching me judo?" Her mother blinked. "That is the one thing I never regret. Because when they tried to take your voice, you still stood." She reached out and touched Nalia's shoulder. "And when you burned that letter today, you reminded them you are not here to disappear." Nalia's throat tightened. "I do not want to be a symbol." Her mother smiled sadly. "Symbols are born when someone decides to be visible, even when it hurts." By 11 o'clock that night, the number of signatures on the petition reached 624. But something else happened, too. A new page went live, created anonymously, titled, "Cold Creek Should Listen First." It did not scream. It did not threaten. It simply listed two things. 1. A still image of Griffin standing behind Nalia in the storage room, his hand mid-reach, her face frozen in alarm. 2. A quote from Nalia's testimony. "Fear is a lesson I was never meant to learn here. But courage, I have studied it every day since." And at the bottom, a button marked, "Sign in support." By dawn, it would surpass 1,000 names. But Nalia did not know that yet. She only knew the fire had been lit, and for better or worse, it was spreading. It began before the sun rose. Long before the hallways stirred with morning chatter or the parking lot filled with student cars, 4 figures stood in the heart of Rose Hill High's courtyard. The air was crisp, dew clung to the benches, and in the center, where silence once reigned, Jade, Owen, Tanner, and Miss Calloway arranged folding chairs in a tight circle. New stage, new microphone, new permission slip, only a circle. Miss Calloway, the school's only black faculty member and the English teacher who assigned Baldwin when no one else dared, placed a single sign on the ground beside the chairs. It read, "Speak in, your story, your voice, no more silence." By 8 o'clock in the morning, the bell rang, and no one went to class. They came instead to the courtyard, first in trickles, then in waves. Dozens, then more. Students standing with their backpacks still slung over one shoulder. Teachers watching from windows. Administrators shifting uneasily behind office blinds. A hush settled over the space. Miss Calloway stepped forward. She did not speak loudly. She did not need to. "There are no rules here," she said. "Just one promise. We will listen, and we will not look away." She looked over the crowd. "And for those who stayed, we begin now." Jade was the first to sit. She spoke about the fire drills that were never for people like her. About how the quietest girls often learned to run before they knew why. About the jokes made behind her back, always just loud enough for her to hear. Her voice cracked, but she did not stop. After her, a boy from the math team spoke. He said nothing at first, just held up a picture of his sister. Then quietly, "She left this town 3 years ago and never said why, until yesterday. She told me Griffin was her reason." Then came a girl with dark curls and shaking hands. "I tried to report it," she said. 3 times. They told me to prove it. Then they asked me what I was wearing." A junior in a purple hoodie stepped into the circle next. He adjusted his glasses, looked down at his sneakers, and whispered, "I kissed a boy behind the band building last year. Griffin and his friends caught us. They followed me home for weeks. I almost jumped off my roof last May." A collective breath held, and did not release. Someone else's stepped forward. Then another, and another. Over 20 students by noon, every story different, every story the same. Fear, shame, silence. Until now, from a distance, the news trucks came like shadows stretching over the edge of the town. One by one, national outlets arrived, vans marked with bold station logos, reporters with notebooks, cameramen carrying quiet eyes and long lenses. Cold Creek had become a name whispered across dinner tables, classrooms, state houses, but no one was ready for what the speak-in revealed. Inside the front office, Principal Halbrook watched the live stream from his phone. His hand trembled against the coffee mug he never drank from. Behind him, a secretary whispered, "There are reporters asking for a statement. 3 of them." He said nothing. Down the hallway, Griffin's father slammed a door shut in the Board of Trustees' office. "This is a circus," he growled. "They are poisoning the well with fiction." But no one could stop what was no longer a rumor. These were not whispers. These were declarations. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the courtyard was filled. Not with chants, not with protest signs, but with survivors. Miss Calloway stood once more. Her voice did not rise, but her presence made the air feel thicker, heavier. "I have taught here for 16 years, she began, "and in that time, I have seen hundreds of students walk through these halls. I have seen them succeed. I have seen them suffer. And I have seen what happens when we ask children to carry wounds in silence. When you wanting to?" She looked out over the crowd. "I stayed. Because someone had to. Because I knew one day we would need a circle. Not a podium, not a press release. A place to say, 'I am still here, and I will not disappear.'" The courtyard was still. Then a slow clap began. Then another. Then all at once thunderous applause, not out of celebration but out of recognition. They were not clapping for triumph. They were clapping because they could finally hear each other. That evening, the headlines changed. What was once framed as "a divided town" became "Voices Rise in Cold Creek," "Students Hold Speak," "Into Confront School Culture," "Survivors Speak," "A Reckoning at Rose Hill High." Cable networks picked up the footage. The video of the LGBTQ+ students' quiet confession trended for 12 straight hours under the tag number "The Ones Who Stayed." Social media, once a battleground of blame, shifted. Underneath a clip of Jade embracing the girl with dark curls, a comment read, "They were never weak, we just never gave them space." That night, Nalia watched it all from the edge of her bed. She did not speak. She just listened. The voices were not hers, but they had carried her pain with them. And somehow, that felt heavier than any silence ever had. Her mother stood by the door, holding her phone. "They just announced it," she said quietly. Nalia looked up. "The school board has formally invited the State Civil Rights Commission to launch an investigation." Nalia stared at her, breath caught. Her mother nodded. "It is happening. They are coming." In the courtyard, the folding chairs had been left behind. The circle still stood, and on the concrete where the sign once lay, someone had written in chalk, "We do not vanish, we remain." It was the kind of morning that felt like memory. The sky above Cold Creek was streaked with soft golds and pale blues, a rare mercy from the town's usually brooding clouds. Folding chairs stretched in long rows across the football field, the grass beneath them freshly trimmed, still dewy. Families clutched programs with names printed in serif fonts, and students in navy caps fidgeted beneath the weight of their futures. Nalia stood behind the curtain of the temporary stage, wrapped in her gown, the fabric rustling faintly with every breeze. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of knowing what came next. She had been invited to speak. The administration had insisted, "You earned this. After everything, you should be the one to close the year." But something inside her had shifted. This was no longer just her story. From behind the curtain, she looked out over the crowd. Her eyes landed on Miss Calloway, seated near the front, dressed in a tailored navy blazer, with a pin shaped like an open book on her lapel. There was something different about her posture, something more grounded, more whole. An announcement had come that very morning. By order of the Rose Hill School Board, Miss Calloway is appointed interim principal of Rose Hill High. It was printed in bold at the top of the program. The students whooped and cheered when it was read aloud. Some parents applauded with pride. Others stayed silent, lips tight. Nalia breathed deeply. Her name was called. She stepped into the light. The applause was warm, sustained. Phones rose into the air. Even Miss Calloway looked surprised by the sheer volume of it. But Nalia held up her hand. She reached for the microphone, fingers grazing its cold surface, then turned to a girl sitting 2 rows behind her in the class of graduating seniors. A girl with strawberry braids and a soft smile that always seemed to vanish around adults. Nalia walked to her. No words, just an outstretched hand. The girl froze, then slowly stood. Confused whispers rippled through the crowd. Nalia guided her to the microphone and whispered something no one else could hear. Then she stepped back, and the girl, her name was Myra Bell, spoke. Her voice was fragile at first, like the beginning of a song barely remembered. But it grew. She spoke of the time she was shoved into a locker for wearing a rainbow pin, of how someone slid a threatening note in her locker during sophomore year, of how she cried in the girls' bathroom for over an hour, waiting until her shaking stopped, and then how she watched someone stand up and say no this year, how Nalia's silence had not been defeat, but a beginning, how the circle in the courtyard had saved more lives than anyone would ever know. By the time Myra stepped down, there were tears in the audience. Not everyone clapped, but those who did so with both hands and every inch of their hearts. Later that day, in the library-turned backstage room, Nalia sat across from a local reporter. The woman had gentle eyes and a badge that read WNIC Cold Creek Channel 9, but the camera beside her was not the only one waiting. CNN had called. So had NBC. The New York Times had offered a column. And yet, when the reporter asked, "Would you consider speaking nationally about this?" Nalia only smiled, shook her head gently, and said, "I am not a headline, I am a student. Let me graduate." The woman paused, then nodded and put her pen down. It was the best quote she would never print. In the hallway, beneath the banner that read "Congratulations, Seniors," Jade and Owen waited with iced coffees in hand and weary pride in their eyes. "You really gave the mic away?" Owen said, half laughing. Nalia shrugged. "It was never mine to begin with." Tanner joined them moments later, sleeves rolled up, face flushed from sprinting across campus. "Calloway said the committee's investigating Griffin's dad, too," he said breathlessly. "Subpoenas, emails, everything." Owen raised his eyebrows. "That quick?" "It is not over," Jade murmured. "But it is moving." They did not smile, exactly, but they stood a little straighter. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the parking lot had begun to empty. Streamers hung loose from rear-view mirrors. Balloons bounced against windshields. Laughter echoed in bursts, like leftover thunder from a distant storm. Nalia walked toward her mother's car, diploma tucked under her arm. Her hair caught the wind, and for a moment she looked almost exactly as she had the first day of school, only taller, quieter, more sharpened by truth. But as she neared the sidewalk, a dark sedan idled by the gate. Inside, through the tinted window, sat a woman, Bryce's mother. Her eyes followed Nalia, calm and unreadable. Not angry, not grieving, but cold. A warning passed in silence. This town never forgets. Nalia's step slowed, then stopped. She met the woman's gaze, not with fear, but with something deeper, not defiance, not hatred, just clarity. Then she turned and walked on, because the story was no longer about revenge. It was not even about Bryce. It was about the ones who stayed, the ones who spoke, the ones who stitched something stronger. For every girl who had been told to stay quiet, for every boy who hid his heart, for every voice that cracked but did not fall silent. As she passed the edge of the school gates, Nalia paused once more and looked back at the field where they had all once gathered. It was just a football field again now, But to her, it would always be where the silence broke. In a town like Cold Creek, silence had always been a kind of currency. The kind passed from parent to child, from teacher to principal, from neighbor to neighbor, unspoken rules written in glances and sealed in tradition. Do not speak. Do not stir the water. Do not name the wound unless you are ready to bleed with it. But one girl refused, not because she wanted to be a hero, not because she craved the light, but because the weight of staying silent began to feel heavier than the cost of truth. Nalia's story was never about revenge. It was about a thread, frayed, trembling, but strong enough to stitch a tear wider than fabric. A thread passed between friends, between strangers, between the girl in the rain and the boy who finally chose to tell the truth. A thread that turned into a rope strong enough to pull something hidden into the light, and it was never just hers. Because behind her stood Myra, and Jade, and Tanner, and every student who had been laughed at, pushed aside, or told their pain was just a phase. Because behind her stood teachers who were once students too, like Miss Calloway, who knew how it felt to walk a hallway and wonder who was safe. This is not just a story about bullying. It is about the systems that make it possible, the silence that allows it to grow, the fear that keeps us from speaking, and the courage that blooms in the quiet spaces when one voice breaks the stillness. So, if this story echoed with something inside you, if you saw yourself in Nalia, or Jade, or Owen, do not let it stop here. Speak, even if your voice shakes. Especially if it shakes. Tell us what you felt. Share what you have seen. Because stories like this one live longer when they are not just watched, but remembered, questioned, carried. And if you want more stories that dare to dig deeper, that ask harder questions, that stand beside the ones often pushed to the edge, stay, subscribe, be part of this circle, not for the headline, but for what comes after. Because the fight for truth is not always loud. Sometimes it begins with a whisper, a bruise no one saw, a girl walking home in silence, and sometimes it ends with the whole world listening. What did this story awaken in you? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe voices like Nalia's matter, make sure you are here for the next one.